any breaks, I swear.
Never do. Never do.
All right, so what happened after this Borley report came out?
So they did more. So let me finish the report. They analyzed the evidence of a haunting and poltergeist activity for each and every period appears to diminish in force and finally vanish away. Terrence Hines wrote that Mrs. Marianne Forster, wife of the Reverend Forster, who lived in a rectory from 1930 to 1935, had actively engaged in fraudulent claiming haunted phenomenon. Price himself salted the mine and faked several phenomena while he was at the rectory. Marianne, later in life, admitted she had seen no apparitions and said she alleged ghost noises were caused by wind, friends she invited to the house, and other cases by herself playing practical jokes on her husband. And also, so she could go out and get,
Hammered by Lodger.
yeah, by lodger. Yeah. I'm a lumberjack. Yes, I am. I'm about to lay some pipe. Many legends of the rectory have been invented. Also, the children of Reverend Harry Bull, who lived in the house before Lionel Foster, claimed to have seen nothing and were surprised they had been living in what described as England's most haunted house. There's also could be an explanation for the nun story. The nun, remember the story of the nun and the monk who wanted to get eloped, got caught and walled in to the were murdered pretty
Sure.
much.
Hmm.
The kids who told that story might have made it up from another story that they heard, which is called Montezuma's Daughter, which was written and published in 1893 by Ryder Haggett, or Walter Scott's poem Marlon, which was published in 1808. Those are both stories about nuns. A nun that one of the stories in it was a nun that falls in love with a monk, and they're caught, and the nun is walled up.
Hold on. So the stories of the nun in association with this house were retold by kids?
Yeah, one of the kids were yeah, they would tell because the kids that supposedly seen the nun walking around were earlier supposedly telling ghost stories. And one of the stories they were telling about a nun falling in love with a monk, and them both being killed, and the nun coming back looking for a lost love.
How romantic, kiddos. All right, so
Yeah, they were making up a bunch of stories about
yeah,
this.
that's pretty debunked too. Okay,
Yeah,
continue.
yeah. So they finally demolished the rectory in 1956. And pretty much they had a lot of other stories about there still was stories about this area being haunted, particularly the church. It was haunted. So they debunked most of the previous, a lot to skeptics, a lot of debunking of the hauntings of the previous of the rectory, and before it was burnt down and after. So even like they were saying, there was one story of like people when the rectory caught on fire, that there were people were seeing apparitions walk throughout the home while the rectory was on fire. One saw a nun dancing in the flames, and another saw other spirits walking around in the flames. A couple of people say they saw a nun peer down and look directly at them from a room that was on fire.
Mm.
And it was not just the people who were living in the rectory, but also people who were coming from around the area to come see this home catch on fire.
Okay.
So, but the rectory that burnt down, but people are still saying that the church in that area is still haunted. So, after like here in the early 1970s, unexplained events in and around the church, many of them recorded on tape, have proven to be far more baffling than anything that happened at the old rectory. So I'm trying to find one of the stories. Like in the church graveyard, planted around the clipped yews and horse chestnut trees line the graves of the Bull family. Vandals had broken the stone cross on the grave of the Reverend Harry Bull, the Victorian rector who dozed his last days in the summer house and reported seeing a ghostly nun in phantom coach.
So this is like 30, 40 years after the house was demolished or the rectory was demolished?
Yeah, this is during the 70s. People are still reporting ghost activity at the church and around the rectory. Here, let's see. One ghost hunter, Gregory Kroom Hollingsworth, who runs a small psychological research group at Harlow, Essex, believes from his investigations that the cause of the rector's death in 1927 was syphilis. The advanced syphilis is accompanied by narcolepsy, a constant drowsiness during which the sufferer hallucinates, a fact that would seem to explain the rector's visions neatly. But Kroom Hollins does not think that this is the whole answer, for he and his assistant, Roy Potter, claim to have observed the phantom nun themselves for a period of about 12 minutes. Kroom Hollingsworth came upon the rectory controversy in the 1960s and decided to examine the facts themselves. He and his group began a series of vigils at Borley. Like the subsequent investigations, they chose to keep watch at night to avoid interruption. Over a period of years, in different weather conditions and at different times of the year, they heard an assortment of noises, raps, heavy pantings, and the sounds of furniture being moved. On one occasion, while in the orchard, something huge and dark, like an animal, approached them between the fruit trees and banged loudly on the fence. I don't know, might have been a deer. On another night, around 3 a.m., the group heard laughter and merriment, which seemed to be coming up the road towards the Borley church. The night was misty, but there was a significant light to see that nobody was in the roadway. Assuming that the voices were those of late night revelers, but puzzled by the direction of the sound, Roy Potter got into his car and coasted down the road alongside Long Melliford with his engine off. He met nobody. Using his walkie-talkie link with Kroom Hollingsworth, he arranged the experiment of shouting at various points along the Long Melliford Road to see if the sound carried. The listener in the churchyard heard nothing. In an attempt to record similar noises, a tape recorder was set up in the porch of the church while the group kept watch from a distance. Nobody was seen to enter the porch, but the group heard a loud crash and found the tape recorder pretty well battered. The tape had been torn from his reels and lay in the tangle. But it was the sighting of the nun that convinced the Harlow group that something was indeed strange about Borley. One clear night, Kroom Hollingsworth was standing in the orchard looking towards the nun's walk. Suddenly, I saw her quite clearly, in a gray habit and cowl, as she moved across the garden through a hedge. I thought, is somebody pulling my leg? Roy was out in the roadway, and the nearest of the group and I shouted to him. The figure had disappeared into the modern garage, and I thought that was it. But as Roy joined me, we both saw her come out the other side. She approached to about 12 feet from us, and we both saw her face, that of an elderly woman in her 60s, perhaps. We followed her as she seemed to glide over the dry ditch as if it wasn't there, before she disappeared into a pile of building bricks. Neither of us was frightened. It was odd. It was an odd sensation, but peaceful and tranquil.
Pretty
So yeah, so they claim this here and experience ghostly apparitions, including seeing this nun at the church. There's no evidence to say that these guys are tricksters or fraudsters. These are guys that are very passionate. This is back in the 70s. They're very passionate and very take ghost investigations and paranormal phenomena very seriously. And they're claiming to see the nun, and they're not the only ones claiming to experience paranormal phenomenon throughout the church in the area where the rectory used to be. Even today, there's people who visit the church and visit a rectory and say that they experience something weird.
I see. All right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, the entire history of this house is sort of littered with people with their own motivations and their stories, from the price fella to the cheating reverend's wife.
right,
Um, but yeah, I mean, the stories from the '70s are obviously significant in the fact that like the people reporting this didn't have any um, direct connection to the house like the other ones did.
right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah. So, it isn't much of the story left. I mean, other people have experienced, again, paranormal uh, issues when they go to the church and stuff. It's still surviving today. If you happen to be traveling to that area of England or you're there and you want to visit, I believe they'll let you visit, but treat the place with respect. It is, as they say, the Reverend what say, this is God's house, so treat it with reverence. But the story is fascinating, but I'll go with. Well, what's your opinion after hearing everything about the story? What's your opinion on it?
I, I mean, my opinion on it is that like I said, there was some people with clear motivations
Right.
to keep the lore of this house alive,
Mm-hmm.
um, and having the claim of the most haunted place in England is obviously an important distinction for people who want to believe in this stuff,
Right.
and that lore sort of probably fed into some of these stories. But the fact that like so much of it was debunked through the years makes me think it was just people making shit up.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I think a lot of this was making stuff up. I think that there's other people who might have experienced paranormal phenomenon that um, might have happened, but I think for the most part that most of this is made up, especially in the rectory. What's going on now and what people say they claim to feel now, it might be a totally different story. What's going on in the church might be, yeah, it probably is a totally different story. It might have some true paranormal phenomena going on right there. But for the most part, when Harry Price was there and when especially Harry Price and the Forsters, I think for their most part were making things entirely up. Some might have happened, but for the most part, I think it was mostly making things up to try to keep the lore and the story going on for monetary reasons. So
For monetary reasons. I mean, you got the guy setting fire to the house to collect insurance money. So,
yeah,
like, there's definitely people with like some pretty serious motivations
exactly.
keep these stories going. So I'd like to know more about you said people who like still visit this area or weird things when they go there. I'd like to
Yeah,
hear more about that.
yeah. Here, look. Here's a couple more stories that here. I'll tell you about this. Doing a paranormal investigation in 1974, they put a tape recorder on the altar in the Borley Church, and they recorded some strange sounds, including raps, crashes, mysterious footsteps, and they had it picked up on a cassette recorder. The summer of 1974, one of the most regular researchers at Borley had been Ronald R. Russell, a member of the Infield Parapsychological Research Group, and professional photographer Frank Perry, an electrical engineer, and John Frey, a mechanical engineer, usually worked with him. Russell had achieved results while taking photographs of the area with a Agfa CC2 one camera, in which the film is contained in a cassette and processed at the Alpha Lavatory. This is some old technology. Sandwiched between perfectly normal frames, we got ectoplasmic stuff in the churchyard. shadows where no shadows should be.